Hello, hello everyone. I am Zolo Ivan. I'm the head of communication of AFAN, Association of Future African Neurosurgeons. It's a pleasure to have you this afternoon for a presentation from our series of lectures. So today, Dr. Urik is going to be presenting on the surgical anatomy of the craniovertebral junction. But before we get to Dr. Urik, I would like to introduce some member of the panel. So please, Dr. Nurudin, please, could you introduce yourself? Hello.
Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Nuruddin Pankole. It is a pleasure to me today to attend this session of AFAN, and welcome to everyone. I am currently in France for internship. I am resident in neurosurgery in Rabat Center training, and I am so glad to see my brother Pono to present for us this nice topic. So welcome to everyone.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Nuru. So next is is Professor Abdullahi Jimo. Please, Professor, could you introduce yourself?
Hello, good evening, everyone. Good evening, you. Good evening, Nuruddin. Good evening, Zolo. Good evening, everyone in the house. Dr. Abdullah Jimo. I'm a Nigerian neurosurgeon. Was in Rabat for fellowship at Hôpital de Specialité, but temporarily back in Nigeria because of the COVID crisis.
Yeah.
Good to see everyone, and you, all the best.
Good to see you again.
Right.
All right, thank you very much, Professor. So next on the list is Dr. Aminata Salah. Please, could you introduce yourself?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Aminata Salah. It's a privilege to be here once more for the presentations. I'm a third-year resident neurosurgeon. At this moment, I'm in Namibia, where it's extremely cold, actually in negative degrees. So, feel for me, it's extremely cold. That's
sorry
all.
about that, Dr. Aminata.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So next is Dr. Marco Meloni. Please, Dr. Marco, please, could you introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you again. My name is Marco Meloni from Italy. I'm a consultant neurosurgeon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Marco. Okay, next on the list is Dr. Darwin. Darwin, please, could you introduce yourself?
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Darwin Chimba. I'm a medical student from Copperbelt University, Zambia. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darwin. So next on the list is Dr. Ndogmo Fabrice. Please, Dr. Ndogmo, could you introduce yourself?
Evening, you all. I'm Ndogmo Fabrice, postgraduate year 2 at the Yaoundé University, Yaoundé Faculty Medicine.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Ndogmo. So next on the list is Ndale Genevieve. Please, Ndale, could you introduce yourself?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jeff, fourth-year medical student in the University of. I'm happy to be here with you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Please, Kiki, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Chuyu Keke. I'm a future medical student from the University of Zambia. Thank you.
All right. So, please, Doctor, and last but not least, Dr. Doc Punu, please, you have the floor. Introduce yourself and you can start your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Zolo. Thanks to everyone. I'm Dr. Victor Pono. I'm a resident at Rabat Center, Rabat Training Center in Morocco. So I have the pleasure to talk to you today about this topic of surgical anatomy of the craniovertebral junction. We will first of all introduce the topic and then talk about the embryology of the craniovertebral junction. Then we'll go drop to the surgical anatomy and we conclude. In introduction, we can say that craniovertebral junction is quite complex in a relationship, in its anatomical relationship, and it's composed of foramen magnum and as the atlas and the axis, I mean the first and second vertebrae bones, and it provides the anatomic anchor that connects the cranium to the cervical spine below. And this craniovertebral junction display a special bony configuration and articulation more built in the way that its flexibility is not found in any other region in the spine. The articulation that is more flexible, more mobile, and mobile in the whole part of the spine. And its stability and complex movement in that region depend on the arrangements of ligamentous, membranous, and muscular structures. All these combined make this craniovertebral junction a special junction that we'll talk about today. And this is the region. You can see how tight it is, how small it is, and the traffic of different organs, the traffic of structures going on there. And you can tell this region is not fracture or rupture of this region is not compatible with human health. What I mean is when then there is a fracture or this region, the patient will die. So it's not compatible with life. About the developmental embryology, we can say that during development of human being life, the notochord plate will develop and will stimulate the growth of neural groove, the neural groove and the neural fold, which will lead to the development of the somite, and then the somite will be formed with the scleroderm, and the somite will later on lead to the formation of the vertebrae. And you can see from the 4 weeks of gestation, we have already 42 somite. And this table is showing us different what the scleroderms and somite lead to, which organ they finally form at the end of the embryological development. So what happened exactly for this at this point of craniovertebral junction? Over here we have the somite, and let's start from the bottom to the top. The C3, you can see it has the hypocentrum, the centrum, and the neural arc, all of them in fact. So, but during the developmental embryology, this hypocentrum will disappear at the C3. The centrum will form the body of C3, and the neural arc will form the remaining that is posteriorly. C2, the same thing. The centrum will disappear. The hypocentrum disappear. The centrum will form the body of C2. The neural arc will form. The posterior part. I mean the lamina and the processus. And what is interesting here is that if you look very well at the colors, you can find out that the odontoid part of the C2 is nothing else than the body of the C1. So because at C1, on the hypocentrum do not disappear. Hypocentrum become the anterior arc of the C1, and the centrum itself, which supposed form the body of C1, become the odontoid part of C2, as you can see over here. And the tip, and this is the so-called the pro-atlas that will form at the end, the apex of the odontoid. So this is how it goes on during the embryological development. And during this development, there will be ossification of the atlas of the first vertebrae. So it shows or it displays 4 different parts of the ossification. We have the anterior midline synchondrosis and the accessory synchondrosis, the neurocentral synchondrosis, and posteriorly we have the posterior midline synchondrosis. All these different parts we have on the right and on the left side, on the left and on your right side, will ossify to form the real bone of C1. Same thing also as C2, you have 6 different centers of ossification, as you can see on C6. And during this ossification, there may be some abnormalities and at the odontoid. At times you can find a bifid odontoid. You can find also the abnormalities on the neural arc on the body. This one is just to show you how the C2 evaluate during the development from 8 weeks of embryological life to adolescent, passing by the 4th month, where there is already at the bottom part of the body the first ossification center, then second ossification center appear at the base of the odontoid, and there will be at birth the ossification of the lower, the base of the odontoid is ossified already at birth. At 3 years of age, you have the C2 that is ossified almost completely, remaining the apex, that which is little bit ossified, but is still going. Ossification process is still going on to finish at the age of adolescence. During this process, I forgot to tell you, during the process, there may be different abnormalities we can find in different human beings. So about the bony structure of the craniovertebral junction, the first thing we talk about is, of course, is the skull base, and is the foramen magnum. And this is the foramen magnum, as I'm showing you. I don't know if you can see my mouse that I'm moving. So
yes, we can see.
The foramen magnum is over. Sorry?
Yes, we can see.
The
We
foramen
can
magnum
see
is
your
oval
pointer.
in shape. Is oval in shape. Okay. So the foramen magnum is oval in shape, and it has its lateral anterior part, the occipital condyle that lies on both sides, on both lateral anterior both sides of the foramen magnum, as I'm showing here. This foramen magnum has been studied by different scientists that try to measure, try to do different measurements at this part of this foramen magnum. But what I want you to return over here is just to know that this lower part of the clavus is called the basium, and the opposite part of the basium is the most posterior part of the foramen magnum is called opistium. These 2 names that I want you to find out. So the basium is here, and the opistium is at the back. These two basium and opistium are the one giving the limits of the foramen magnum. But the foramen magnum is not showing all the same in all human beings. No, you find different shape of the foramen magnum. It can be oval, as I show you right now. It can be round in shape. It can be square in shape. It can be even triangular in shape. It can be pentagonal or hexagonal in shape. It depends of variety. The way we are different as human beings, that's how we can have also different foramen magnum. But the foramen magnum is all the same. Is showing the mean sagittal distance is about 35 millimeter, while the transverse distance is about let's say 28 millimeter. I mean, this distance is about 28 millimeter, and the anterior posterior one is about 35 millimeter in length for the foramen magnum. Let's talk about the occipital condyles, which is a very important structure also. Lying, I show it on the other slide, is lying on the both sides of the foramen magnum, and it articulates with the trapezius, as you can see on this CT scan. It articulates with the trapezoidal lateral mass of the atlas below. So these are the occipital condyles I'm showing, and the mean length of the occipital condyle is about 23 millimeters. Its width has wide to be 10 millimeters, and the height is about 9.2 millimeters. And the distance between the two condyles, the two occipital condyles, this distance is about 29 millimeters. Is well shown on this other axial shape, axial structure, axial of the axial computer tomography. Is more shown on this one also. So there's no correlation that exists between the condylar length and the head circumference of the human being, so the foramen magnum or the foramen magnum diameter. What is important about this slide that I want you to attend is that as a surgeon, the surgeon should be aware of the hypoglossal canal, which is a very important canal while performing the transcondylar approach. The hypoglossal canal measure is lying 45 degrees to the sagittal plane, and has an average of 12 millimeters. So the intracanal orifice of the hypoglossal canal is situated 10 millimeters of the superior and posterior to the anterior tip of the occipital condyles. Why do we need to know this hypoglossal canal very well? Well, it's because surgical treatment of lesion located in the region anterior to the foramen magnum, lower clavus or superior cervical region needs sometimes hypoglossal canal approach to deal with any lesion that can be located in this part of the skull that I just cited. And hypoglossal canal, as you can see, it lies on the anterior lateral side of the occipital condyles, and it exits when we turn the skull base upside down. It exits is what you are seeing over here at the almost midline of the medial part of the occipital condyle. And also you have to go through all of these structures that are shown here, the musculus and the vascular, the nervous vascular structures before you get to use this approach of hypoglossal canal. About the CT scan, the so-called igloo sign that you can see on the CT scan, you know, to find out where is your hypoglossal canal, because when you over here you can see on the CT scan, you see this is our C2 with the odontoid and with its lateral, its superior articular surface that articulates with the lateral mass of the C1, and then this you have the atlanto-occipital joint. So after the atlanto-occipital joint, there is occipital condyle. So the hypoglossal canal lies between the occipital condyle and the jugular tubercle. And this angle that is here is showing, like as you can see over here, the neck of the eagle. So when you find this structure, which is showing like the eagle, head of the eagle, which is called the eagle sign, so no doubt you have your hypoglossal canal on the neck of the eagle over here. This is also to show the structure of the hypoglossal canal that can be used. And here you have your C2 articulating with the C1, and then the C1 which is receiving the occipital condyle, of course. And of course, you just see right now after the occipital condyle, you have the hypoglossal canal. You can also see here the lateral mass and the C2 and the lateral mass, and then the occipital condyles that is here, and the vertebral artery that it is also a very important structure while when you carry on any approach in this area. So what about the C1? The C1, which is called atlas. The C1 is a particular vertebra that is from any other part vertebra in the human body. It doesn't have, as I described it when I was talking about the embryology. Sorry, it doesn't display. It doesn't have any. It doesn't have the body, but it has two anterior. It has the tubercle, and then the two anterior lamina and the two posterior, the anterior arc, sorry, and the posterior arc. You can see that the anterior arc is short, is the one that is shorter, and the posterior arc is the one that is more longer. And the measurement of the C1 is very important when, of course, when you want to carry on some operative procedure. You can see is written over here. You can see with me, and the anterior posterior distance of the C1 is about 35 millimeter, and the distance between the two transverse process from the end to end is about 78 millimeter. You have also the distance between the tubercle, anterior tubercle to the skin, I mean to the posterior tubercle at the skin, which is about 50 millimeters. This is show you on the CT scan how it looks like, the axial CT scan of the atlas. So you can, as you can see, this is the spinal cord with the arachnoid space that is around the spinal cord. Of course, this is nothing else than the transverse ligament that lies from one lateral mass to the second lateral mass to hold the odontoid in place, in its place. And you have the anterior tubercle that is there, and so on. So lateral mass and all this. So this is how you can find C1 on the CT scan. I've showed it already. And what about if we want to carry on some screw or some operative procedure of C1? We have to be careful with some measurement and some degrees to follow when doing when screwing the C1. So the lateral mass screw places of the vertebra, and the lateral mass, the screwing of the lateral mass of the C1 is particular because injury to the vertebral and the carotid arteries, injury to the C2 nerve, nerve roots, and the hypoglossal nerve, it can be at risk when we are screwing C1. This is why we have to know the measurement very well of this vertebra, so that we can know how to carry on this surgical procedure. So the depth of bicortical screw insertion is about 19 millimeter in the axial plane and 20 millimeter in sagittal plane. And the mean sagittal entry point for the lateral mass screw is up to 33 degree on the right and 37 degree on the left. The left one, you can see this here on the right, okay? And it should stay around 2 to 3 millimeter medially. And on the left, the average distance between the vertebral foramen and the screw pathway is about 8 millimeter using the landmark that is recommended upward, because it recommends that the ideal entering point for the lateral mass screw is at the junction for the mesial edge of the posterior arc attaching to the mass. So as you can see it over here. That's about C1. What about the C2? The C2 is also called epistros because of the configuration that it displays, and because of its work also, because it works as a pivot for the atlas and allow the head to rotate. And the lamina of the axis is quite thick. As you can see it over here, the lamina of the C2 is quite thick. This is the odontoid. We talk about it right now. The odontoid, the physical, the superior articular surface, and the lamina. So the lamina of the axis is quite thick and can be used as a viable salvage in failed C2 pedicle fixation, and is in cases of hydring anomalous vertebral arteries. This lamina of C2 is thick, as you can see. It is quite thick compared to the other lamina of the other vertebrae. It's thick, and in thickness is about 5 millimeter. The length is about 25 millimeter, and it forms an angle between the spinous process and the lamina. This angle that is formed is about 48 degree. This is to show you the sagittal view of this odontoid that is shown over here, and some measurement of the articular surface of odontoid, the anterior articular surface of the odontoid, which is about 11 millimeter in length, in anterior posterior, yes, anterior posterior length, and its transverse is about 9 millimeters. And there's also the distance from the width of the odontoid is the wideness is about 11 millimeters. All those measurements need to be known. Why? Because the safe site of the entry in the C2 in the axis is the superior and mesial third. This is the C2. So you have the place where you can enter, not to be sure that you are not going to do any damage to the structures that are around. Mostly the vertebral artery. So is the superior and medial have to come superiorly and mesial third. So if you see the distance from here to here, that from the distance from the process, the transverse process to the body of C2, I show it now, is about 20 millimeters. So you have to come divide that distance into 3. So you have to be at the mesial third. You come in the inner part, and mesial third of the posterior surface of C2 vesicle. When you fix you do your screw at this area, you are sure that you are not going to injure any vessel to cause any damage to the patient. This is just to show you how it must look like when you carry on any control of CT scan after screwing. You can see your odontoid is quite straight, and at the middle of these two lines joining and the articulation, the occipito-atlanto articulation. What about the ligamentous and membranous structure of the canovertebral junction? These ligamentous structures are divided into two types. You have the extrinsic ligament and the intrinsic ligament. The extrinsic ligament are the anterior longitudinal ligament, as you can see it over here, the ligamentum flavum, and also the ligamentum nuchae. And you have also the intrinsic ligament that are atlantoaxial, the cruciate. You can see the cruciate ligament that is here, odontolateral, and anterior atlanto-occipital membrane that is well seen on this CT scan, the anterior atlanto-occipital ligament that you were seeing here. Of course, you have over here your odontoid and the C2. You have the posterior atlanto-occipital membrane that is also at this site, just below your opistheon, which is shown here. This is to show you that in case when the transverse ligament, which is the strongest ligament of C2, shows some dysfunction, you can see the apex of C2 that jump backward and compress the spinal cord. And you know, this compression can lead to different clinical symptoms and signs in the patient, and even might lead to death. After talking about the ligament, you have to know that the skull base has been a curious place for different scientists that try to carry on some morphometry, some atlantoaxial morphometry, and you can see from the basium to the opistheon, you have this line that joins the basium and the opistheon, which is called the Macrae line. This Macrae line, when you draw it on CT scan or even on MRI, when you draw it on CT scan, if you can find these two parts, I mean the basium and the opistheon, and you draw this line. Now, in normal patient, the tip of the odontoid process normally lies below the line, as you are seeing here. So the tip of the odontoid should be below this line of Macrae line. which join the basion and the opistheal. There are some other lines also, like Chambern line that go from the posterior heart palate. This is the posterior end of the heart palate that is shown here. This is the posterior. This is the heart palate. Sorry, and here you have its posterior end, and from the posterior end of the heart palate to the most posterior margin, this line from here to here, from the most posterior end of the opistheal, you have the Chamberlain line. This line have the Chamberlain line, and since most time on the X-ray or on CT scan, we don't find this opistheal. So this Chamberlain line has been corrected by Mark Gregor that draw another line from the posterior margin of heart plate to the lowest part of the basisquamous occiput, which is this line. And clinically, this line, the tip of the odontoid, once more, should be not more than 5 millimeter above this Chamberlain line, or should be not to be more 7 millimeter above the McGregor line. And there are some other lines, many different lines that have been drawn and explained clinically. But the three ones that I show now are has more clinical significance. But there's one more that I'll talk about is the Wackerhen clivus baseline, which is the line that is over here. Clivus is the line that is drawing along the dorsum of the clivus. Because you can see here, drawing along the dorsum of the clivus. This line should intersect the posterior 1/3 of the odontoid process. As you can see, the odontoid process is here, and this line that is leaving the dorsum of the clivus cannot be. It can cross. It can intersect the odontoid process, but no more than 1/3, to show that the odontoid is at its place, well held by the cruciate ligament, well held by the transverse ligament also. Is a CT scan to show the lines that we just talked about now, and you can see on this image you can find the basium, the opistheum. So you can draw your line, your Macquarie lines. You can draw it, and all the different other lines that I just talked about now, that we can help us to know that when you have a patient with trauma, or a spinal cord, cervical spinal trauma, that our odontoid is in its place or not. You have this perpendicular PBC2 measurement that is also used to measure any displacement to the backward or forward of seat of odontoid. And this PB measurement is the line that is drawn from the lower point of the clivus to the dorsum of the odontoid, that will join the perpendicular line at this level. So this PB line, this PB C2 should be less than 9 millimeters. Once is more, that means is more or less. If it's more, that means our C2, our odontoid has moved forward. So for this topic, you can see that the complex anatomy and the intricate relationship among its various components make the craniovertebral junction unique and pose a significant challenge for surgeons trying to gain access to deeply seated lesions in this area. A thorough understanding of the anatomy of the craniovertebral junction is paramount for achieving successful surgical outcomes, and numerous morphometical, as you just see it right now, and the anatomy studies of this region provide a wealth of knowledge in regard to normal measurements indices and parameters that are essential in pre-operative planning, as well as intraoperative guidance during surgical approaches to such a unique and challenging region. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hugues. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the wonderful presentation.
Pleasure. Any comments and can help to arrange?
Yeah, actually, so I would like to welcome those who got into the webinar while you started presenting already. And please, is there any input from the masters who are present, Professor Abdoulaye Jimo?
Hello, that was a fantastic, excellent presentation. I think Dr. Hugues, go off the screen share so that we'll see every other person on share your screen.
Okay.
That was a fantastic presentation. I really slightly distracted. I wasn't particularly, but the outline of the presentation was fantastic. I partly followed it, and that was a fantastic one. Very good.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right, all right.
Thank you very much, bro. Okay, Doctor, is there any input from Dr. Marco?
Well, I can just say that it was a wonderful panel, a very well choice of the iconographic, and I like so much how you do. I liked the position of the screw in the atlas in the axis. It's very important landmark. Not so easy as a lumbar. You need a very precise manner to put the screw. Use of preferable, and so absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Marco. Please, Dr. Kabulo, do you have a comment and input? Dr. Kabulo, okay, maybe he stepped out. Dr. Nuru, please, is there a comment or an input you have?
Hello, Zolo. Thank you very much, Hugues. Well done, because I was waiting you at many parts, but you put everything inside your presentation, and that is masterclass presentation. And congratulations. I don't have anything to say, and wonderful. But I want just to try. Maybe we should always know why we should know this region part of anatomy, because we have Chiari bone malformation, traumatic injury of the part. We should have that in our mind. That is why this region is very important to know, because it's not compatible with life, with quality of life in Chiari bone malformation. Also it is good to show us the different entry points in this region, and also you know sometimes you need also to go up to make screw and to make fixation positive and the T1, T2. So wonderful job, and thank you, guys.
Thank you. That's true. And can I say something?
Yes, go on, doctor.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you. And I saw it also in the literature when I was reading the articles. They talk about the Chiari and let me see. My before last slide when I'm talking about the PBC2, which should be less than 9 millimeters. And that is what is used for. It allows us to know that the patient is not having a Chiari. There's no Chiari, and yeah, that's true.
Exactly. And those lines that you show us, it is very important to know the Wakanem line, the matrical line.
Exactly.
All those lines, yes, it is very important to make our diagnosis about Chiari bone malformation. So thank you very much.
Exactly. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Nuru. So Dr. Aminata says she says thanks for the detailed presentation. So we are going to move straight to the questions from the panelists. Is there anybody who has a question you would like to ask to Dr. Uke?
Yeah, I have some questions for Dr. Hughes.
All right, go on, please.
Yeah. Well, I'll first of all say it was a great presentation. And well, he mentioned the various shapes of foramen magnum. Well, I would just like to add to that the relevance of those shapes, because about 30% of foramen magnum are ovoid, and the ovoid presentation, the ovoid shape generally have a medial protuberance of the occipital condyle. So when drilling the occipital condyle to approach anterior lesion anterior to the brainstem, to the lower brainstem, that hinders the view. So it's important to know that shape before going for the operation. That's what I wanted to add concerning the shape of the foramen magnum. Also, I'd love to hear about anatomical variations concerning the atlas, for instance. Sometimes you have a bony ridge on the sulcus arteriosus, where the third branch of where the third portion of the vertebral artery passes on the atlas. So you need to know.
Please, Dr. Uke, could you mute your mic, please, for a while?
Sorry?
Could you mute your mic for a while he's giving his point? Thank you. Okay, Dr. Marvin, you can continue.
Okay. Well, I was saying I'd love to have some anatomical variations of concerning the atlas and also the pica, because in 15% of patients, according to some studies, we have an extradural origin of the back, the pica, and when approaching the posterior, when approaching posteriorly the occipitocervical junction, we may damage that artery, thinking it is a posterior meningeal artery, while it may be the pica. Also, you focused on instrumentation of the atlas and the axis during your presentation. I think one of the landmarks, anatomical landmarks for the drilling of the occipital condyle, which is very important, is the jugular tubercle. I think it would have been good to say something about that. Okay.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Marvin. Is that all for your questions?
That's all.
All right, thank you. Dr. Uke, do you have something to say about it, a comment?
I got what the point he was making, but I mentioned it in my, sorry, I've mentioned it in when I was talking about the structures that we need to pay attention to when we are manipulating how to say this area, mostly when we are trying to place some screw to some screw into the pedicles and all this. I mentioned the vertebral archway, about the C2 nerve root, and the vertebral archway, C2 nerve root. These are the structures that are most commonly can be in difficulties or can be injured when we are trying to manipulate this region. But his last point that he was making. I got the point anyway. Yeah, it's okay.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Hugh.
About the skull base, the skull base, the first thing to talk about the skull base form. I mean, the overall form of skull base. In the literature, I checked about 6 or 7 publications, but there is no. They even mentioned that the skull base, the form of the skull base, does not have to. I mean, it doesn't have a relationship with the size of the head, or even if the foramen magnum is square in shape or is triangular in shape. This is the anatomical structure of this individual, and this cannot be the reason why the vertebral tonsil, for example, will get into this foramen magnum. When we have some structures coming down to this foramen magnum, that is already some abnormalities, and the causes need to be searched to find out what is the reason by doing, for example, CT scan of the cerebral CT scan and any other radiological exam that can be carried on to check what is wrong with the patient. But different size of the foramen magnum, different size of the head, of course, but there's no relationship between them. And thirdly, the structures inside the head, the intracranial structures are also disposed anatomically according to each person's, I mean, the size and shape of the foramen magnum. That's what I can say about that.
Sorry. I think that Marvin, you want to know about. I hear you talk about drilling of the occiput. You want? I don't know if I understand well your question, but you talk about how to drilling the occiput. That's the condyle of occiput. That's what I hear.
Well, my comment was mostly about the relevant anatomy of the occipital, the occipito-cervical junction, relevant to drilling the condyle or when approaching anterior lesions to the brainstem. So.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
When
you want to bring the occiput, occiput condyle to approach brainstem. Which part of brainstem you want to approach, and you need to drill condyle of occiput.
Well,
what's the correlation?
You can have a schwannoma of the occipito-cervical junction. Generally, they use a transcondylar approach or far lateral approach. For that, you need to drill the condyle.
Yes, but it's not to approach the brainstem.
No, not to approach the brainstem. I mean, approaching lesions anterior to the lower brainstem. That's lesions facing the third lower part of the clivus.
Okay, okay, I understand now. Okay.
So,
do you understand what he wants to talk about?
Yeah, I understand.
Well, I have some article mentioning the relevance of the shape of the occipital of the foramen magnum.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. If you want to approach,
I'll share that with you.
Yes, I am agree with you. If you want to approach the region about about the tumor, of course you need sometimes to drill hospital, because sometimes you can have the tumor can be so anteriorly than posterior. So you need sometimes to go up and to drill the condyle. I don't know if Marco Melody have something to say about that. I think that's what you want to say. In some cases, you need also to go up to drill occipital to come to the part, the posterior part of clavus. It is you have to respect the same line that you describe, and in this way, it is the Wakanem line you should respect, and to go through it to drill and to can cut some parts who go anteriorly about the cranial.
What I want to say is that hello, Marvin.
Yeah.
Hello? Yeah, what I want to say is that today the today's topic is about the surgical anatomy of craniocervical junction, and there's another topic about the surgical approaches and treatment and all those things about the cervical. This craniocervical junction is a huge topic, and even in different books, it has been divided into different chapters. Today's one is about the surgical anatomy. I mean, this is what we've done. But your discussion for me is going already to the next presentation maybe. I mean, you are getting into the surgical approaches of the craniocervical junction. So if that's the discussion, I mean, we will. That's another presentation. That is another. I don't know if you are getting what I'm saying.
Yes,
hello,
you are right.
Dr. Okay. Dr. Nurdin, you got my point, right?
Yes, you are right. You are right. I want to let Marcos to say something, maybe.
Yeah, he said yes. He said, okay.
Okay. What are you asking me, Noro? What about the approach, the far lateral approach?
Yes, he wants to know if what is the relevance of anatomical part to go to drill the condyle of the hospital condyle in the lesion who go through to the cranial vertebral junction to the skull base. But that is another topic. That is another chapter about the surgical approach that we can have in the.
But if you want, we can finish with this and discuss it in 30 minutes. Let's Zolo direct this presentation that we will run it over, and then we can discuss with the question of Marvin.
All right. I suggest. So, I think it will be best if we can actually approach it during the presentation on the surgical approaches to the craniovertebral junction.
Exactly.
Okay. So
thank you very
that's
much.
it. Yes, thank you very much for your presence, your time. Thank you so much to the presenter and to all the panelists. It's really a pleasure to have you around. So we hope to see you next week or Saturday. Exceptionally, we placed this presentation on Sunday because Dr. Uke had something to do yesterday. That came up, another presentation. So that's it. Thank you very much for the panelists and those who came. So yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, d'accord.
Thank you all for being there. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
Okay.